I always see women complaining how all men are the same. Men only want one thing. They only care about themselves. Men are liars, they're cheaters, they're misogynists, they're manipulative, etc. The list goes on and on. And you see this the most from women that tend to be looser with their affection, I'll say. You know, women that get around a bit. But it isn't just those women. I think this kind of attitude is pretty common amongst all types of ladies. But whenever you see it, it's so obvious where they get it from. They're not actually assessing the male population as a whole properly. They're just making sweeping assumptions based off a very particular sample of men that actually is not at all representative of most men. That sample, of course, being the men that they themselves chose to be with. But it's all the sub 5 and average looking guys that really get the worst of it, because these women will keep choosing men just like that in the future, every time giving some new good looking asshole a chance because, oh no, I can tell he's different. It won't be the same this time. This one's actually a good guy. Yeah, I know he's cheating on the mother of his child with me, but it's complicated, okay? He's had a hard life. You know, when it comes to a man they're actually attracted to, all that, all men are pigs, men only want one thing, all that goes out the window. And that guy gets the benefit of the doubt. He gets to be treated like he's actually an individual human being with his own thoughts and feelings. Meanwhile, all us average and below average looking dudes are all assumed to be lying, cheating assholes when most of us have never even had a woman to cheat on in the first place. I'm reminded of a time at my old job where a young female coworker I had was very hypocritical in how she responded to two different men, and I think it really illustrates the problem well. But first, there's a few things I want to say about this topic. First thing is, it's not just about dating. I mean, really, it's not about dating at all. That ship sailed for me a long, long time ago. And I know for a lot of men, they never even had a chance to begin with. So this isn't an issue of being discriminated against in matters of romance. The reason it's such a big deal is because of the discrimination men are facing when we try to find jobs, or just when we're going about our day-to-day lives just trying to exist peacefully. See, more and more women are getting into positions of power. They're making hiring decisions in large corporations. They're making laws, okay? And aside from that, the whole system is cucked by feminism. Our whole society is gynocentric. So when a large portion of the female population hates all men based off of their personal experiences with a small subset of the male population, a subset that, again, they themselves chose to get involved with, obviously all men are going to suffer for it. We're all being punished for the sins of Chad. Just to be clear, I'm not saying every man that's successful with women is a bad guy. Of course, there are plenty of good men out there that do well for themselves, and I'm sure a lot of those guys end up getting demonized as players or fuckboys or whatever anyways, when they aren't even like that. But just looking at average human nature and considering the incentives at play, it seems to me that a man that is highly attractive and highly desired by women, a high value man like that, is going to be more likely to be the type of guy that will lead women on and cheat on them and just generally not treat them very well because he can. Sex is a big motivator. It is highly addictive, I would imagine. I might not have personal experience with that, but I know how addictive it can be just to watch videos of people doing it. So I'd imagine the real thing is even more addictive for those that are able to get it. So it just makes sense that men that have more opportunity to get with women are going to be more likely to get addicted to it. And so they're also going to be more likely to engage in addict type behavior to get it. As in, they're more likely to lie, cheat, manipulate, etc. All of those things. I mean, think about it like this. Who do you think is going to be more likely to be addicted to gambling? Someone who lives in the middle of nowhere with no internet connection in an area where gambling is illegal? Or someone who's lived their entire lives in Las Vegas right outside the Strip? Obviously, the person living in Vegas is more likely to end up becoming a gambling addict. Now, you could argue that's not really a one-to-one comparison because everybody has access to adult content online, so just from that, a guy that is physically repulsive might end up being just as addicted to sex as a guy that actually has lots of options. But I don't think addiction to the simulated version of something necessarily translates exactly to addiction to the real thing. There's probably some crossover, but point is, men that are highly desired by women are probably more likely than the average man to be guilty of the types of behaviors that women accuse all men of doing. Not just because they're necessarily sex addicts, but it could also just be as simple as it's because they can get away with it. You know, if an average or slightly above average looking guy manages to get a girlfriend and he cheats on her or he mistreats her in some other way, there's a good chance that relationship is going to be over with. He's probably going to get dumped. But if a 9 out of 10 chiseled jawline Giga Chad mistreats his girl, he might just get away with it, especially if it's just the first offense or the first time he got caught. There's a good chance he gets away with it. And if I know anything about human nature, it's that people tend to keep doing things if they keep getting away with it. And I would imagine most people, if they're continually doing something that's morally wrong, but the person they're victimizing is not punishing them for it, then they might start to think, well, maybe it's not so bad to do that thing because the person I'm doing it to doesn't seem to care that much. So all this is to say, women are building up this false perception of men that is based on their experiences with a very particular type of man, attractive men. And those men are more likely to engage in all the bad behaviors like lying, cheating, etc. So the rest of us are just fucked. Women just assume we're all narcissistic, manipulative, lying, whatever. They think we're all like that because they choose men primarily based on which men are good looking, which is the segment of the male population most prone to those types of bad behaviors. Another aspect of this is I think there is some truth to the idea that women are attracted to bad boys, you know, guys with dark triad characteristics. I don't know if it's necessarily that those traits are attractive to women, or if it's just that men with those traits, so men that are narcissistic, Machiavellian, and psychopathic, they just tend to do better with women because they're more aggressive about going for what they want. But whatever the case may be, most women have plenty of options to choose from. They don't have to choose men that are showing them every red flag under the sun. They could choose to date a guy that doesn't have any obvious narcissistic traits or any obvious tells that he might not be the most stable partner. They don't have to choose those men. But time and time again, we see that most women tend to go for guys that the criteria is that they have the best combination of looks and status, with looks being the more important factor, I would say. So women aren't using the best criteria when they choose men. That is clear. And because of that, now I have a bad reputation. But I'm completely innocent, like most men. You know, most men in this world would never harm a woman. They would never even dream of it. Yet when the question is asked, would you rather be stranded in the woods with a bear or a random man? All the women were saying they'd rather be stuck with the bear, implying that they actually believe statistically their chances of survival are better with a bear, a creature known for brutally murdering people. They choose that over being stranded with a man. I mean, forget about the bear. Even if the question was, would you rather be stranded in the woods with a random man, or would you rather be stranded alone? You'd still be a fool to not choose the man. Chances are he's gonna help you. Why would you just assume that any random man is likely to be a freaking predator? Oh, that's right, because y'all constantly choose to give all your attention to men that do fit that description, while you ignore the rest of us. Now, push comes to shove, if women were actually faced with that choice, I think most of them would probably choose the man. If it was actually a matter of survival, they'd cut the shit and they would pick the man. I will say, it is fair to use intuition and your own observations when you're assessing things. In fact, I highly encourage that approach. But the problem here is that it's not like these women don't know any kind-hearted, normal men. They just ignore those men. And they assume deep down, those men are the same. They're just faking nice. It's like how you always see women talking about how disappointed they are whenever a guy they were friends with tries to shoot his shot, and they say, "He never really cared about our friendship. He just wanted me for sex." Never mind the fact that women also are adamant these days that you should never cold approach women, and they always say that not focusing on a relationship and just trying to be friends and trying to talk to a woman normally as friends is the approved way of starting a relationship. Then when a guy does that, all of a sudden, oh no, he was just being manipulative, trying to get into my pants. He never actually cared about me at all. You know, you can never win as a normal man. Whatever you do, or however you do things, it's always going to be assumed to be wrong one way or another. They're always going to assume you have the worst intentions. But if a good-looking man does the same thing, he'll get the benefit of the doubt every time. I mean, essentially what it all boils down to is the halo effect. Attractive men don't have to follow the rules, and unattractive men are always assumed to be breaking the rules somehow, even if they're following the rules. It reminds me of back when I was working an office job years ago. We had a big lunchroom where everybody ate lunch, unless you went out, of course. But I would always sit alone, and inevitably, I would often end up listening in on the conversations my coworkers were having at their tables. But I remember one time, some people were talking about how the United States doesn't have an official language, and they were all talking about how great that is. Then one guy, who, by the way, this guy was friendly with everyone, and he wasn't even ugly or anything. He was just a normal-looking guy. I think he might have been gay, actually. Just kind of had that vibe. But anyways, this guy asked something along the lines of, why would it matter if English was the official language? And immediately, everyone started ganging up on him. There was a lot of older people that were more conservative that I worked with, but they sat at a different table and they just weren't involved in that conversation. A couple of them did jump in eventually, but anyways, I remember this one girl, she got so offended by this guy asking the question of why the official language even matters, she ended up crying about it. She was acting like the guy's being racist or something, which I think he was legitimately just asking, like, why does it matter? I don't think he was trying to disagree with anybody. He was just asking the question. And he was apologizing profusely as soon as he realized how he was being misunderstood, but that didn't even matter. The one girl was just hysterical about it, as if the guy had said something truly evil. Well, fast forward a bit, and this new guy starts working there. I talked about him a bit in another video. It was the former professional hockey player guy. Well, this guy was your stereotypical Chad, very good looking guy. Well, he was openly pro Trump. Not that he was just going around talking about politics all the time, but I did hear him arguing about politics a couple times, mostly with this one older Mexican guy. They were both very cordial about things, but you could tell it was kind of heated, or maybe passionate is a better word, because it's not like they were yelling at each other or anything. They were just having a passionate debate. I guess that's how I would say it. But I just remember sitting there at lunch one day, listening to this pro hockey Chad arguing with the Mexican guy about immigration. And he was basically saying, like, yeah, we should ban immigration from Muslim countries. And the Mexican guy was arguing against that. But I just found it interesting how the same girl that was brought to tears over the one average looking guy that questioned why it mattered if English was the official language or not, she was sitting there at the same table with Chad, not saying a damn thing. And just like every other woman that worked there, but more so with her, actually, she was very friendly with Chad, always flirting with him and everything. So it was just very night and day how she reacted to the one guy who didn't even say anything controversial, and she freaking cried about it as if he was calling for genocide or something, compared to when the good-looking guy was actually arguing for something that, regardless of what you personally think about it, the whole Muslim ban thing was a very controversial topic, but she didn't seem to have any issue with that. But something tells me if that other guy had been saying the same thing Chad was saying, he would have been tarred and feathered. And then, because believe it or not, the hypocrisy of this young lady actually gets even worse than that. Everything I know about this just comes from me overhearing other people talking, by the way. But obviously, as I'm sure you've gathered, this girl was very progressive, very left-leaning, and she was a vocal supporter of BLM, because there was a guy that got shot by the cops in the city where I was working, and that was all everybody was talking about for a few days. And she was one of the main ones going on about it. So I remember hearing her expressing some very anti-police sentiments. Okay, well, sometime after that, I found out she was dating a police officer. Not at the same time when I heard her talking about that stuff, but it was sometime after that. She dated a cop. I know that's kind of getting away from the topic of the video, but the point is, women typically choose men based primarily on their looks. So that's why they end up getting such a bad impression of men as a whole, because the men they interact with the most and they really get to know on a deeper level, it's just men they find attractive. So even if it's not necessarily bad guys that they're choosing, sometimes it's just guys that have completely opposing values to them. But they'll never admit they knew that from the start. They always want to act like, I was blindsided. I had no idea. I thought he was wearing the MAGA hat ironically. I thought it was ironic. How could I have known? So then they convince themselves that the guy was manipulating them the whole time, like he was hiding who he really was just to get in her pants. When really it's like, no, you chose to ignore the fact that he obviously does not have values in line with your own. That is on you. Then, of course, that's just further evidence in their mind that all men are lying scumbags. Now, real quick, I already know some of my hate watchers right now are thinking, well, how is women blaming all men for the sins of a select few any different from you blaming all women for your own bad experiences with certain women? Well, my response to that is, I don't blame all women for anything. I'm sure there's been times when I've spoke hyperbolically, or maybe I didn't make it 100% clear that I'm not talking about all women when I make certain statements, but I do try my best to always let it be known I do recognize that there are women that do not fit the stereotypes. And in my personal life, I always try to judge everyone I meet individually. I try to not, judge people by my perception of a certain demographic they belong to or whatever. And by the way, I know that sometimes when a woman says something like, all men are pigs or whatever, sometimes she's just venting. That's obviously not always meant to be a completely heartfelt statement. But going off my own life experiences and the patterns I see occurring, just using my pattern recognition skills, a lot of women really do have negative beliefs about all men. And I'm not even basing that as much off what they say as I'm basing it off their actions. The way I've had so many women react to me when I was just asking where they keep the toothbrushes at the grocery store, for example, or just saying, how's it going to the girl at the checkout at Dollar General, they just react so rude and dismissive, like they must think I have ulterior motives. I've had way too many reactions like that. And I see it happening with other guys too. And I read the shit they're posting in comment sections, like on the 2X chromosome subreddit. A whole lot of women these days truly just have nothing but disdain for men. And it's not coming from their experiences with chronically lonely guys like me. They don't even give us the time of day. How could their impressions of men be coming from us? They're just choosing the worst possible men to give all their attention to, then assuming we all must be exactly the same. Now, you might say, what about men that think negative thoughts about all women? Well, I don't think that's right either. But the difference is man-hating women base their beliefs off true crime podcasts and also off a sample set of men they choose to be with. Okay, that's the important part. I know I keep repeating it, but it's very important. They choose these men. I guarantee most women have literally hundreds of options, maybe thousands. There are good guys they could choose from. And sometimes they will make a good choice, sure. But they're obviously choosing guys that aren't the best often enough that they let it paint how they view the rest of us. Because whenever I see women online or in person talking about men are all cheaters, they just want to use women for their bodies, blah, blah, blah. It's obviously only men with high tier looks that they're basing that off of, because they won't even give average men a chance these days. And if they did, an average looking guy isn't even going to be able to cheat in most cases. The only men that even have enough options to cheat are high status, highly attractive men. I don't know. I think I made my point. If anything I said here resonates with you, please consider watching some of my other videos. There's also some secret videos you can watch for free on Patreon, videos YouTube does not want you to see. So check that out. There's no sign up required. You can just watch the videos. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.